We got to the bar that night around midnight. My friends knew the bartender, so she was taking good care of us. Now, I haven't had more than a couple of drinks in a row in the last probably 20 years, but back in the day I drank. My cocktail combo of choice was a Corona beer and a shot of Jose Cuervo tequila. And I had 6 of each that night before we left around 2. When I got into the car, I really couldn't see in front of me. It was blurry. I mentioned this to the girl I was with, Tahani, and she offered to drive. But I said, well, let's wait till Billy, her boyfriend, let's wait till he gets in the car and see how it goes. And by the time Billy got in the car, I could see again. So I made one of the worst decisions of my life and decided to drive. I had a new sedan. It was supposed to do about 140, so when we got out onto the highway, I thought I'd find out and pinned the gas pedal. We got up right around 140 when we entered the off-ramp. We needed to get onto the toll road in Northern Virginia to take us to our homes in Reston, about 30 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. I thought I had enough time to back the speed of the car down before we hit the apex of the turn, but I was wrong. And when we did, the car started to slide. I turned into the slide and held it for what seemed like an eternity, but I was so wasted and so anxious and so wanting it all to stop that I convinced myself we were now going slow enough that I could turn the wheel to the right and the car would just slide out and stop. I don't know how fast we were going at that point, but still way too fast for that. So when I turned the wheel to the right, the car immediately took flight. We flew off the edge of the off-ramp, which was descending, so there was a ledge, smashed down onto the roof and then onto the wheels and again. Glass, all 4 of the windows smashed, and glass came into the cabin with the dirt and rocks and dust, and we bounced up and down. When the car finally came to a stop, we were on the edge of the roadway we were to get on, and the car was pointed in the opposite direction, and it was parked perfectly. It looked as though it had been to a salvage yard and it had been crushed, but the crusher hadn't finished. Billy and Tahani suggested, let's get out of here. I'm sure they wanted to save me because they weren't going to get in any trouble, but I felt so guilty for what I had done and yet so grateful that we were all not only alive but okay, that I wanted to start serving my penance as soon as possible. So I called the police, and the police came and did what police do. In the 2 months that followed, I totaled 2 more cars. The insurance money hadn't come yet, so I just bought cars with cash, and I put a Mercury Mercur into the back of a Ford F-250 pickup truck on the way to work one morning, and I put a little Chevy something into the back of a family's minivan on the way home from work one evening. Now, a couple years prior, I had finished 4 years of college and 4 years of grad school and gone to work at the local psychiatric hospital as a therapist, and within a year or so been promoted to clinical director. I thought I was a big man and that I was bulletproof and wasn't really capable of recognizing my own stress, but when you almost kill yourself and your friends and others, total 3 cars in under 2 months, you know that something is very, very wrong. And I knew it was stemming from work. So I went to the leadership at work and sought some help. And I don't know whether I was the most sympathetic figure, but it just didn't look like there was going to be any to be found, so I resigned. Oddly enough, at that same point in history, in that same geography, the internet was being born. It sounds crazy now, but in the mid-90s, people didn't know what the internet was. But there was reportedly more fiber optic cable under the ground there, in what's referred to as the Dulles Technology Corridor, than there was in Silicon Valley. And my friends were working in these businesses. I didn't know what they were, but they were working in them. And they were getting rich. I knew more than one millionaire admin at that point. Now, I wasn't ready to take another job with any weight in my profession, and I needed to keep some money coming in, and I wanted to find out what was going on all around me. So I got a job at a staffing company that staffed people, temp placements at these sorts of companies, and they placed me at a few, and it was okay. It seemed like most, big company corporate gigs. And then they placed me at a company called Proxicom. Proxicom was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. It was an internet consulting firm. They helped companies understand the tools of technology, implement those tools of technology, and then put the creative design on the front end. And there were young people everywhere. It was a very casual place to be. I saw this guy on the first day in shorts and Birkenstocks, and they were getting stock option rich and enjoying this great quality of life at work. There was a margarita machine Thursdays, which they predictably had to stop, and there was a foosball table and a pool table and a basketball court and a bar, and they all seemed academic stars, that recent college graduates who had gone to Ivy League schools. When I finally got a desk, the girl behind me, Michelle, had a master's from Brown. The girl next to her, Terry, had an MBA from Harvard. The kid adjacent had gone to MIT. I mountain biked before work with this guy who was a former Navy SEAL who had gone to Wharton to get his MBA. So it was an incredible environment. And I thought, this would be great, but this is not what I've made a commitment to for my career, and I don't know whether I have the background anyway. So I figured I had seen what I needed to see, and it was about time to go. And then there was an all-hands meeting at that location one afternoon, and I was invited to attend, so I went. It was hosted by the CEO, Raul Fernandez, and I was standing in the back, and there was a girl beside me, and she was probably in her mid-20s, but she looked like she could have been 17, very slight, mousy brown hair. And as soon as Raul starts the meeting, she just lights into him. She's questioning him on corporate strategy, on how he's stewarding the company as they approach an IPO. And I thought, this girl's going to get fired. You don't question the CEO on corporate strategy in front of everyone. But Raul answered the questions without skipping a beat. When I got back to my desk, and this might sound a little bit dramatic, a little corny, but I have been observing, studying, and teaching mentorship my whole life. I was the struggling kid, then I was a parent of the struggling kid, then I was therapist to the parents and the struggling kids. I was a struggling worker, and I was a manager to the struggling workers. Now I'm consultant to the managers and the struggling workers. And when you teach mentorship under the leadership heading, you talk a lot about respect. You talk a lot about a strengths-based approach. And in the organizational world, you talk about flat organizations, where the CEO has as much respect for the worker as he or she does for other C-level executives. Now, I study it and teach it, and we talk about it, but you don't often see it. And as I say, it might sound a little corny to you now, but at that point I said to myself, this is the change you're trying to create in the world, and here it is happening. And I decided, I got to get a job here. I got to be a part of this somehow. So I started saying yes to everything and pitching myself in every way imaginable. And I managed to hang around for more than a month, but in the end it didn't look like it was going to work. I didn't have a Harvard MBA. And then the man who would become the chief marketing officer, Brian Eckert, convinced Raul and the rest of the C-level folks that they needed an inside sales department. And they tasked me with, from scratch, designing, developing, and deploying it and running it. Now, this was going to be an unusual inside sales department as well, in that any sales-related inquiry that came to any of the locations, and I think we had maybe 7 in the U.S. and a couple overseas, any sales-related inquiry would be routed directly to me, and I would introduce the company to the world. Now, I was grateful to be given this opportunity, but I had just buckled under the weight of the responsibility of running a small unit of a psychiatric hospital, and I absolutely could have buckled under the weight of this responsibility. But the way I was treated at Proxicom was different than anything I had ever experienced. Now, I don't know whether Brian, who was my boss, had studied strengths-based management methods, or whether he was just used to being around people who won, and so he expected I would win, or so that's the way it sounded. I can still hear him at the end of conversations, we had many, because I had a lot to learn and therefore a lot of questions to ask, saying to me, "But those are my thoughts. It's your practice. You do what you think is best. I'm sure you'll make the right decision." He acted as though, and they, the management, acted as though they had such confidence in me, such trust. And understand, the pressure was on, because the various practice leads around the country, they didn't want potential business being routed from their location to some shrink in Reston to possibly never make it back to them. So we had to demonstrate the value of this practice. In the end, it was estimated that the business that the inside sales department helped bring in would be worth close to $40 million to the company. Now, the point that I want to make in the video is this. Every human being, and therefore, of course, every worker, has within them a breadth of capability. And while it's understandable for managers to focus on what's wrong, I mean, human beings have evolved to focus on the threat first. We naturally focus on what's wrong, what's not being done, on the weaknesses. And while you do that, it's not guaranteed to bring about a 140 mile an hour tequila-fueled near-death crash every time. It does tend to cause the workers to disengage. Close to 7 out of 10 workers are disengaged. And while you focus on what's right, it's not guaranteed to bring you $40 million. But it is more likely to engage workers. Now, it's difficult as a manager to look beyond the frustration of worker disengagement. It's difficult to look beyond what's not and try to see what could be. To look beyond the glaring weaknesses that you see sometimes and try to see a person's strengths. But we know that no one has more power to affect the engagement, productivity, and quality of work of the worker like the manager does. And when the manager looks to a worker's strengths, when they focus on what's right, they're more likely to get it.